So today we're once again going to go over and reinforce the fact that WTO terms are not very good and are not going to be good for us. Because the new thing that Brexiteers are now starting to say is that, oh, no deal's fine, yeah, it'll be perfect, WTO rules will be fine. And yet, if WTO rules are so fine, where is the country that trades solely on WTO terms? Oh, there's no one. And, oh, Brexiteers, can you name who gets to appoint judges to the court that oversees all the rulings for the WTO? Just, question, maybe something you should look into. Because, as you hate the European Court of Justice so much, why do you like the WTO court so much? At least on the ECJ, there are British judges. On the WTO court, there are none. So, let go WTO and WTO rules OK are the latest Brexit banners, trying to making crash out of the EU with a no deal in 7 weeks' time sound benign, even positive. It is make-believe. Like the 350 million a week for the NHS on the side of that bus, WTO Brexit is simply the wrecked trade option. Most UK trade is conducted in or through the free trading system of the EU. The WTO is a fire escape when all else fails, applying to a small minority of our trade. Depending on a weak organisation bullied and cowed by Trump and China. Now the Brexiteers propose that the fire escape should become the building itself. Nigel Farage asserts that Article 42 of the WTO Treaty gives us the right to up to 10 years of tariff-free trade while we sort out new agreements. This is not true at all. At all. There is no such thing as tariff-free trade while we sort out new trade agreements. That is completely false. Once again, Nigel telling porkies. So, anyway, the article continued with, not true. Any interim WTO deal on EU trade would have to be agreed within the EU itself, requiring the same process of negotiation and agreement as Theresa May's existing deal and any future trade deal. Why would the EU agree better terms through the WTO than they would have agreed bilaterally? Furthermore, because the WTO is a global organisation, non-EU member states will have a say on any short or long-term proposals for the UK to have lower tariffs vis-à-vis EU states than vis-à-vis them. Not only Trump and Xi, but every small country from New Zealand to Iceland will disrupt our trade to their advantage. The second lie is that the only downside of a WTO Brexit is some short-term inconvenience and disruption. As a letter signed by 12 hard Brexiteers cabinet ministers put it, and this will soon be made up by our newfound role as a global free trade powerhouse. We know this is hot air because the powerhouse depends upon Liam Fox negotiating trade deals to replace or supplement the EU customs union, single market, and its more than 50 bilateral trade deals with third countries, including new signatories such as Japan, Canada, Singapore, and South Korea. Fox promised 40 such trade deals for the moment after Brexit, including a comprehensive deal with the EU itself, which would be, quote, the easiest in history. Yet apart from one rollover deal with Israel and the Faroe Islands, all he has to show for the last 2.5 years is vast air miles. trade expert Peter, I don't know how you pronounce his second name, Yucapanto, I think that's how you say it, describes WTO rules as a road built through rough terrain with free trade agreements, the cars that countries drive on it. Some faster, like full customs union, and some slower, like basic free trade agreements. On this, the WTO highway, the EU is a Ferrari. What a no deal Brexiteers propose is to yank on the handbrake miles from the nearest town and get out and walk. They claim this doesn't matter because we can run just as fast as we drove. Well, what do you think? A WTO threatens destruction of entire British industries. For example, the EU exports 70,000 tonnes of mutton to the EU. The external EU quota, which is what WTO terms actually mean, is 378 tonnes. Do the math. WTO rules barely exist in respect of services, which amount to the UK's fastest growing, most lucrative trade with the rest of the EU. Another WTO assertion is that, in Lord Ilkley's words, it will be a safe haven to resolve trade disputes. Safety requires strength, but the WTO enforcement powers are pathetic, particularly over the superpowers China and the US. Even these powers are undermined by Trump's refusal to agree to appoint new trade adjudicators to the WTO to rule on trade disputes. The head of the WTO, can you name him, has taken to warning about his organisation becoming not just weaker, but irrelevant in the future. In some respects, it is just as well that the WTO is weak, because the UK itself flouts WTO rules all the time and gets away with it by refusing to import chlorinated chicken, genetically modified organisms, and beef stuffed with hormones from the US. We are in breach of WTO rules. The EU circumnavigates them by reaching bilateral settlements with the US. Without the clout of the EU, we will soon find ourselves locked in bitter WTO trade disputes with the US, China, and yes, even the EU itself. Equally farcical is the claim by Jacob Rees-Mogg that there would be no hard border in Northern Ireland on WTO rules, since WTO rules would allow the UK to diverge from the EU in areas as basic as health standards of chicken and beef. The only way to guarantee no checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is the Irish backstop. So, as you can see, WTO rules are going to be a disaster. You know, the idea that WTO rules are going to be the saving grace of Brexit. But remember, in the referendum, no Brexiteer was advocating for this. They were all advocating for the Norway or Sweden style, or not Sweden, Switzerland style options, which would either mean as remaining in the single market and customs union or just the customs union. Why all this push for a no deal all of a sudden? Well, as we said before, first of all, it's a gigantic push to try and get rid of a lot of regulations that a lot of these Brexiteers, particularly conservative Brexiteers, do not like. And they want to get rid of them. They also want to avoid the anti-tax avoidance scheme, which will allow countries to go after companies that purposefully avoid paying tax and are able to use those rules to claim back tax that they have dodged. They all want to get rid of those. They want to avoid those rules because this impacts people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who, for example, might decide to move his wealth about and not get paid as much tax. Under the ATDs, I think it is, the anti-tax avoidance rules, Britain can say, "Oh, Mr. Mogg, we notice you moved this money about. Well, you owe us more tax. And because of how big the EU is and because of how strong it is able to enforce these rules. It's just like the GDPR. When we leave and it essentially becomes the UK data protection rules rather than the global, rather than the European rules, the EU is able to enforce them. This is why companies in America were so concerned about GDPR and why they've even signed up to GDPR rules when operating and holding, people's data from Europe. So, do you think, honestly, that our mid-level economy is going to be able to enforce all this? No, not in the least. We had the whole thing of we sent forward to have what's the guy from Facebook called? I can't remember his name. Mark Zuckerberg. He appeared in front of Congress, and Parliament called him to appear before a group of MPs to discuss sort of the similar things, rules, data breach, even the referendum around us. He said, "No, I'm not going," and then sent an underling who wasn't even like his second in command. He was like way down the chain. Instead, he appeared personally at the European Union and answered questions of people in the European Union. And then you had Nigel Farage's question, which he didn't even bother to answer because it was ridiculous. But there you go. WTO rules are not okay, and Brexiteers are lying about them because either through willful ignorance or they know what they are and are just basically trying to lie to tell people, oh no, WTO is going to be fine, when it's not.